Waking up in the morning and looking around the chicken coop is a very important part of my daily routine. After losing 2 chickens last summer, this became even more important. While throwing the food to the chickens, I look at them carefully to check for signs of sickness or other problems. I imagine what I will remember in the future about the days of COVID-19. Probably raising chickens would become my most precious memory. Due to the online classes, which we call UNTAC, or non-face-to-face classes, I work from home most of the time. This means I have more time to observe the chickens, which has inspired me to do this chicken series on YouTube. COVID-19 seems like to remain a special memory in my life. How will you remember the days of COVID-19 in the future? As a historian, I have an interest in how people remember difficult times in history. The 1930s Great Depression in America can be a good case in point. It was the worst economic downturn in modern history. The unemployment rate was about 25%, which means that 1 out of 4 people was without a job. Since American democracy was closely linked to capitalism, the collapse of capitalism might have led to the dissolution of the nation's stable democracy. Communism and socialism were getting popular around colleges at that time. Above all, it was a crisis of desperation that could lead to the collapse of beliefs that Americans had held for a long time. The Great Depression had been preceded by the Roaring Twenties, a decade which represented the culmination of America's Industrial Revolution, and via its successful emergence from World War I, its assumption of superpower status. It was a time of relative affluence for most American people. But economic depression that followed those boom years profoundly affected the daily life of American families. Nevertheless, many Americans remember the Great Depression as the so-called good old days. I remember talking to an elderly lady sometime in the mid-1980s at the Union Station in Chicago. I asked her about her experiences of the Great Depression. Her story was similar to descriptions of the Great Depression I had seen in books. Indeed, she remembered those days as the hardest time imaginable economically, and yet to her, those were the good old days. I asked her why she said that. She replied that even though there was not enough food on the table, that was the happiest time in her and her family's lives, because hardship brought them closer together. They did the best they could to help each other during those difficult times, which nurtured their feelings of love and togetherness. The American family was not the only institution strengthened by those hard times. As it turned out, American democracy had grown more mature during the Great Depression as well. It's interesting that while mired deep in the swamp of the worldwide financial collapse, the American people chose Franklin D. Roosevelt, while Germans chose Adolf Hitler as their leader. Many years from now, when this pandemic has been reduced to a series of memories, it'll be up to each of us whether we remember these difficult times as the good old days or just painful and difficult times. The answer would seem to be in how we cope. Thank you for watching.